The Panama Canal by Carmen Peeler. A canal is described as an area dug across land. Canals connect different bodies of water so that ships can travel between them. The Panama Canal is located at the Isthmus of Panama and provides passage between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. It runs from the city of Colon on the Atlantic side to Balboa on the Pacific side. In 1513, Vasco Núñez de Balboa crossed the Isthmus of Panama and became the first European to see the Pacific Ocean. In 1524, Spanish explorer Hernán Cortés suggests the idea of making a path across the Isthmus of Panama. 10 years later, in 1534, the King of Spain wanted to build the canal through Panama but wasn't quite sure how to do so. In 1835, France was given a permit to build the canal, but had to first come up with a plan on how to do it. In the early 1800s, the building of the Panama Canal symbolically began under the direction of French diplomat Ferdinand de Lesseps. Count de Lesseps was a hero in France as the principal director of the Suez Canal. He was often honored with huge celebrations. Because of his success in the Suez, de Lesseps thought that a similar sea-level canal could be built in Panama, not accounting for the differences in the tides between the Pacific and the Atlantic, which proved to be a major error in judgment. First, the Panama Railroad was constructed in order to bring workers and supplies in for the project. This was completed in 1855. Over 40 years later, in 1881, they finally started the construction of the canal. The French worked on the canal for nearly 8 years before they gave up. Thousands of French lives had been lost working on the canal, and the construction was becoming too expensive. In 1904, the United States purchased the railroad from the French and rebuilt it on higher ground with heavier gauge line. The use of the railroad proved to be the lifeline in the building of the Panama Canal. 200 trainloads of dirt were removed every day from the work sites. The railroads also transported materials and labor. In addition, the trains served as sleeping quarters for many of the workers. In 1907, George Washington Goethals, a U.S. Major General and engineer, was appointed as the chief engineer. He saw the canal through to completion and became the first governor of the canal zone. In 1909, the canal locks began. The locks towered 80 feet high and 100 feet long. The chamber floors were 13 feet deep. The locks were made of poured concrete. Gigantic forms were built in which the concrete was poured. Big square buckets, nearly 6 tons each, were swung through the air above the locks, dropped into position, and dumped, all by using the spectacular cableway. In 1912, the work was completed on the Gatun Dam to create Panama Canal's main water supply. The Gatun Dam was built using tons of spoilage from the Culebra Cut. Tons of concrete was poured to complete the spillway. On August 15, 1914, the canal was finally opened, and tugboats such as the Gatun were some of the first ships that traveled through. The Panama Canal was a 52-mile-long waterway and was completed at a cost of $352 million, remarkably under budget and under schedule. More than 7,000 ships would transit the canal annually by this point. When President Lyndon Johnson was in office in 1964, anti-U.S. rioting broke out in the Panama Canal Zone, resulting in the death of 21 Panamanians and 3 U.S. soldiers. Violent clashes between Panamanians and American soldiers began when U.S. students attempted to raise the American flag at a high school that was in the Canal Zone. An order for banning flying of any flags in front of a Canal Zone school had been issued. This was because Panamanian sensitivity to U.S. control of the zone. These events led to attempts to renegotiate the Canal Zone status. Panama broke ties with the U.S. and demanded a revision of the Canal Treaty. By 1970, transits of ships through the canal exceeded 15,000 per year. Tonnage was more than 100 million, and tolls exceeded $140 million. By 1973, the United States renewed negotiations on a just and equitable agreement between the two countries, occurring under President Nixon and continuing under President Ford. Under the terms of the 1977 Carter-Torrijos Treaty, the Panama Railroad is turned over to the government of Panama. At this time, the railroad and its infrastructures, although well maintained, were in need of upgrades. By 1998, the Panama Canal Railroad Company was granted the exclusive right to develop, construct, renovate, reconstruct, and modify however they saw fit. In 2001, the canal started coast-to-coast passenger train service, followed by container transport. By 2008, Colon, Panama became the home of the port for Royal Caribbean Cruise Line. Cruise ships such as the Disney Magic paid $313,000 just to transit the canal. Nearly 1 million ships have crossed the canal since it opened in 1914. As you can see, the Panama Canal has been the result of decades of work, leadership, and effort. Now it is means for travel by cruise ships, supplies, and cargo of all aspects. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.